Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm at the People's Summit in Chicago, and now joining us is the host of our new show, The Nina Turner Show, Senator Nina Turner. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Paul J.
So you launched your show. Your first interview was with Senator Bernie Sanders. In his speech the night before, Senator Sanders was as critical or even more critical of the Democratic Party, certainly since the primaries, calling Democratic Party a failed party, I believe. And,
yeah. The reason why Mr. Trump won, he said Democrats failed. Yeah.
And so a lot of people we're talking to here, and it's not just here, it's been happening for the last months, are debating, you know, should Bernie start seriously considering a run outside of the Democratic Party, or should everyone be considering building a structure outside of the Democratic Party? What do you make of that argument, that debate?
I mean, I think you can do both and. I agree with the senator in some ways. I mean, I dedicated my life to the values of this party. And, you know, it's kind of hard to walk away from your lover, if you will. You know, it's not an easy thing to do. And because we have the Unity Reform Commission, you know, something that the senator fought to have, where you have people who are appointed to that commission by the senator, you have people appointed to that commission by Secretary Clinton. It was the agreement that they both had. And you have people, about, I think, 3 people appointed by the chairman, Chairman Perez. And so we had our second meeting in June, and we are going to be talking about and pushing for policy changes on the very issues that people were concerned about, i.e. superdelegates. So in a way, you know, the senator is doing the right thing, I think, to see this Unity Reform Commission through.
This contradiction between the oligarchy and the people of the Democratic Party.
Yes.
This is not a compromisable thing. You could have temporary compromises, you can have truces. But the underlying differences between Wall Street Democrats, Chuck Schumer Democrats, and working class Democrats, it's an antagonistic fight.
Yes.
And and Bernie talks about fighting the oligarchy, not just about reforming the Democratic Party.
Right.
So if it's underlying is antagonistic, the unity is to, in order to create some kind of rule framework, like for example, the reduction of the number of superdelegates. But is it enough to make it a fight that's winnable?
I mean, we will see. I mean, it's my hope, Paul J., that beyond the Unity Reform Commission, that the leaders within the Democratic Party itself will see the wisdom that change must come. That the atmosphere that elected Mr. Trump is one that the Democrats should be concerned about beyond the Unity Reform Commission. That in some ways we need to do an autopsy. You remember when the Republicans did an autopsy in 2012. The Democrats have yet to do that, and they have yet to think critically, have a critical analysis about not just what happened in 2016, but also what has been happening since 2009.
One of the critiques I've heard of the People's Summit, and it's been mostly positive, there hasn't been a lot of critique, there's a lot of enthusiasm.
Yes.
But one critique I've heard is on the question of why isn't foreign policy being talked about here? There wasn't a workshop, there wasn't a central speaker, and it's a very dangerous time in terms of foreign policy. Trump is planning something, not planning, we know what he's doing.
Right.
He's creating an alliance with Saudi Arabia to isolate Iran.
Yeah.
It looks pretty likely, even Trump has said so, about building up troop levels into Iraq. He jokes about going back and seizing Iraqi oil.
Yeah.
But there's no foreign policy discussion here.
Well, you know, Paul J., this is the second year of the People's Summit. I mean, it was really born from Senator Sanders' run. And so, you know, hope maybe next year that will be added on. But there's so much, this country, you know, since the presidency of George W. Bush, President Bush, we have been constantly focusing every single effort on what is happening outside of our shores. And domestically, people have been falling behind. So I don't think it's not necessarily that the people here at the People's Summit don't care about those issues, but not many people are talking about what is happening, what the needs of the people are right here in this country. But you bring up a really good point. And so can that be added to next year? Next year will be the third year. Absolutely. Is that something that some of the people have come in from 49 states, as you know? I'm sure some of them are talking about these issues, But we do have many opportunities to make that within the framework, is what you're talking about, within the conversation piece, the workshops within the People's Summit.
How do you see balancing this fight inside the party against the oligarchy as it exists inside the Democratic Party, and this issue of fighting some of the draconian policies that are coming out of the Trump administration?
I don't think we shouldn't not be fighting for balance. We really are fighting for revolution within the Democratic Party itself in many ways. And you remember a think tank, a Democratic think tank, and I can't remember the name of it right now, just recently did a focus group on Obama 12 voters people who voted for President Obama in 12 and then voted for Mr. Trump in 2016. And these very people, when asked to identify which party is the party of Wall Street, actually named the Democratic Party.
Well, they're not so far off.
Right, they're not, and that the polling right now, there's only a 1% difference in approval rating between the Democrats and the Republicans, even with someone as polarizing as Donald Trump in the White House, someone that has proven himself to this point unworthy of the office. Democrats are still considered the party of the elite. And so to me right now, this is not about balance. This is really about shaking up the very foundation of the Democratic Party. That is part of what this People's Summit is about. And I do caution that if the Democrats don't heed the messages of the people, that the majority of the people in this country right now, Paul J., identify as independents, that if they don't heed the lessons and the feelings that the people are expressing, that they're going to continue to erode people who are so-called card-carrying members of the Democratic Party. So this is not about, we want imbalance right now. Imbalance to the point that we are going to shake things up and bring that party back to the FDR frame.
The idea of progressive candidacies and challenging right-wing Democrats, what's the lay of the land like that in Ohio?
Well, my state swings. You know, we are the quintessential swing state. We swung for President Obama both in 2008 and 2012. But on the legislature and the statewide level, every single statewide office is held by a Republican, and there is a supermajority in both chambers in the state legislature. I mean, when I was there, we had 12 members, and we were thanking God for that. Now there are only 9 Democrats in the Ohio Senate right now. We lost seats in 2016.
Explain that.
The fact that the Trump wave took over in.
No, but it was even before then. They had this super majority.
Super majorities, meaning they didn't even need Democrats to come on the floor of the Senate, for example, to conduct the state's business. That's how far in the minority.
And a lot of that happened over the Obama years.
Yes, and that's the point, Paul J., that we really have to have these deep conversations with the people in this country, that it is not enough just to come out and vote for a president. We have to vote every single year. There's an election. There's issues on the ballot. There are people running. We lost most of the seats that Democrats lost were on the state level of government, were on the governor's mansions. And I would argue that is where we're losing most of the progress up until this point, where we have extreme right-wingers in the Congress, and then we have President Trump. But to that point, most of the ground that was lost have been lost in states on the state level.
You said in your speech this morning when you opened the conference, essentially that the reason for losing all these seats and losing these governor mansions is because people's life didn't get better.
It didn't, Paul J., and we can't delude ourselves on that. The quality of life is not what it once was. You and I talk to people, you're in Baltimore, I'm in Cleveland, people who only needed maybe a job or a job and a half 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Now they're working 2 and 3 jobs. Parents who don't have time to spend with their children because they're at work. Mothers and fathers who are afraid to let their children walk down the street because of violence. Infrastructure that is broken and torn up, that it doesn't benefit individuals or businesses. I mean, we have a real crisis on our hands, and it's more a crisis of consciousness from both parties. But my critique is the harshest on Democrats, because we know better. And because we know better, we should do better, and we have failed the American people.
You were quoted as saying, when you go home and talk to people in Cleveland, They're not talking about Russians.
No.
You know, they're talking about their problems.
They are.
And so why is the Democratic Party leadership so preoccupied with what in the scheme of things is relatively minor? Even if there was Russian interference in the elections, it didn't determine the outcome of the elections.
No.
I mean, I've been joking, the reason the American elites are so concerned about the Russians, because only American elites are allowed to rig American elections. No one else is allowed to do that.
Isn't that the truth?
And that's as American as apple pie.
I mean, is Goldman Sachs a threat? You know, is Wall Street a threat? Are the people who refuse to honor the wishes of the Native American people in North Dakota, are they a threat? I mean, we have many threats. And make no mistake about it, the intelligence agencies have said that Russia interfered, and there should be a consequence for that. We have to do something about that. But to have the American people,
if we believe it, so far the intelligence is pretty thin.
If we believe it, right? But at the same time, well, you asked me a question. Why do I think that the Democratic elite are preoccupied? Because they think that that's what's going to help them win in 2018, instead of thinking, oh, let me dance on the tables until we fix the infrastructure in Flint or places like West Virginia. You know, I got a chance to talk to a young lady from West Virginia who said that the same challenges in Flint regarding clean water is happening to our sisters and brothers in West Virginia, but who's talking about that?
In Baltimore, it's lead paint, and there's
same thing in Cleveland.
Evidence it may be worse in Baltimore than the water problem was in Flint.
Same thing in Cleveland. I think it was Rutgers University that did a study that proves out just your point, that there are 3,000 other areas, urban and rural areas in this country, who have higher lead levels, whether it's paint, whether it's water, whether it's lead leaching. The same problem, but greater, higher levels than even in Flint. Can we do some of that all at the same time? Yes, we need leaders who are going to protect this country from threats, both foreign and domestic. But in the meantime, can we do something to help the people in this country who are suffering and still handle that at the same time?
I mean, there's a convergence of this issue of dealing with foreign policy, climate change, and dealing with domestic problems, because taking $54 billion and giving more of it to $54 billion more to the Pentagon by trashing all domestic social programs.
Yes.
I mean, that's why I would go back to this issue of foreign policy here, whether it's at the conference or not. Forget it. The conference is done now. Yeah. But we need to be having that conversation, because America's getting ready for war. And one of the ways it's getting ready is not by taxing the people who have the money to pay for it. Not in any way am I suggesting there should be such a war. But by trashing as many of the social programs as possible.
You're saying follow the money. Right? Where I always tell I've told my constituents and people that I serve and I continue to serve, that follow the money. If you want to know where the policy principles and priorities is a better word of people you elect to office, follow the budget, follow the money. So no, absolutely, your point is well taken, Paul J. But it's all in the way that you're framing that, and you are framing the notion of war in a way that puts the breadcrumbs out there that this is a domestic concern as well. There's an umbrella to that. And you and I talk a lot about the environmental as well, that is not a secondary, that issue is really at the foundation.
Yeah, because this administration is a fossil fuel administration.
Oh, no doubt about it.
All the foreign policy, and in fact domestic, is all driven by serving oil companies.
Yes.
And the preparation for a troop surge in Iraq, and Trump joked when he spoke to the CIA just after his inauguration. He said, we should have seized Iraqi oil the first time, and then he jokes and says, hey, you guys are going to have a second crack at it. That's what they're planning to do with a destabilization plan in Iran. It's a very dangerous situation.
Yes, it is. And he really told people who he was when he was running, but what he tapped into on the negative side is the fears of many Americans in this country, and that fear was built upon the fact that people who had the power, who wanted to do good, who could have done good, failed to use the power of the people to do that good. And so I do agree with Senator Sanders' critique that, Mr. Trump is in office because of the failure of Democrats.
And it's these Democrats that are cheering on the most warlike activity of Trump.
They're with him on the war side.
Completely.
Right?
Like Chuck Schumer's out there, go Trump, go, when it comes to allying with the Saudis and targeting Iran.
Yeah. no doubt about it. And I think that brings up another important point that sometimes the people who vote can't really tell the difference between a Republican and a Democrat, and hence is our conundrum.
And one of the things I thought very interesting about the People's Summit was the number of people running for office across the country. We had a Real News booth down there, and candidate after candidate after candidate, some who have won,
yes,
some who have a good chance of winning.
Yeah.
What did you make of that?
Not just running for, state rep or school board member, people running for Congress, but talking to people that are actually running to be the chairmen and chairwomen of their respective Democratic parties in their home state, which that is what we need. We need progressives to challenge the status quo, to challenge the establishment. That goes back to the point that you were making about whether or not the Democratic Party can really be reformed. I say that if progressives run for these seats from precinct level to state level to running to challenge establishment Democrats for the chairship, that then we can start to turn this thing around. So it's not just running for state rep or state senator. It is also running within the Democratic Party's apparatus itself. And I got to give a shout out, Paul, to Kimberly Ellis, who ran California, lost by 62 votes, but I would say in many ways she did not lose because she shook the very foundation of that place by challenging an establishment Democrat and coming so very close.
I don't know if you know the answer to this yet, but is Sanders running in 2020? He's sure going like he's running.
Oh my God, you know what? I don't know, but what I do know, and you probably saw the same thing, this is Bernie Nation here, that he was here with 4,000 of his closest friends. There is no doubt that he has energized people across the spectrum. 54% of the attendees here were people of color. I want to put that out there. The plurality here were in their 30s. And again, that really is a big deal, and that is a symbol about the future that they want to see. So if 4,000 people here had any say, Senator Bernie Sanders would be running in 2020.
Cool. Thanks very much. Nina's interview with Senator Sanders is going to be up on the Real News Network in a very short amount of time if you want to see it again. Of course, you can find it somewhere here on Facebook as well and watch it again. And look forward to the Nina Turner Show. We will give you a schedule very soon of a rollout of different episodes. So I think for the next little while, it's going to be every few days of People's Summit interviews. And then it will be a regular weekly show on the Real News Network. So thank you, Senator Turner.
Thank you, Paul J.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.